Hi, I'm Caitlin Koloff, Education Program Manager with the American Anthropological Association. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman in my late 20s. I have light blonde hair and I'm sitting in front of a blurred background. I want to welcome everyone to the Rescue List Talkback event. I am so excited to have this discussion with everyone. This is a really exciting event that we're going to host today. And I want to remind anyone who hasn't had an opportunity to view the film yet that you do still have access to do that. And we can share a link and some instructions on how to access that in the chat. So before we get started, we do have a few accessibility reminders for today's event. You may have noticed that when I introduced myself, I gave a brief visual description. We ask that you do this if you're going to appear on camera, the first time that you appear on camera. And then every time that we transition speakers, we like to let the audience know who's speaking. So for example, next time that I speak, I'll say, "This is Caitlin." And please remember to keep your camera and your microphone off unless you're speaking. This helps reduce strain on bandwidth. Additionally, we do have a live captioner on today's call, so please remember to try and speak slowly, as this will help with captioning. If you need access to captions, if you can't see them on your screen, you can click on the caption button, the CC at the bottom of the screen. We will be also on today's call, we'll be sharing a trailer for the rescue list. We'll be viewing this. And our accessibility and meetings manager, Nell, has prepared written audio descriptions for this, which we'll be sharing a link to in the chat when we get to that portion where we're viewing the trailer. We'll also use the chat for Q&A today. If you're more comfortable coming on video to ask any questions, you're welcome to just use the raise hand feature in Zoom, and we'll call on you and you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Also, if you need any assistance today, please feel free to just ask one of the AAA staff members that's on the call your questions. Feel free to message us in the chat. I also want to let everyone know that we have a membership promotion. If you attend today's call, and let me share some information on that, 1 second. So if you're not a member and you'd like to become one, you can save 10% with these discount codes, and I'll share this information in the chat today. But yes, so we have several codes based on your membership level, and you're welcome to use these after the call if you'd like to become a member. And these are valid through February 28th. Sorry, 1 second so I can stop sharing my screen. Computer is not cooperating today. Okay, so while I figure that out, 1 second. I do want to introduce our presenters today, and with us from the rescue list, we have Alyssa Fedele and Zachary Fink. Alyssa Fedele is an Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker based in San Francisco Bay Area. She co-directed and edited The Rescue List, an observational documentary film that follows two children who were trafficked into modern slavery on Lake Volta in Ghana. The Rescue List won a 2021 Emmy Award for Outstanding Social Issue Documentary, Best Documentary at Bend Film Festival, the Social Impact Award at Heartland International Film Festival, and the James Blue Award at Ashland Independent Film Festival. The Rescue List premiered on PBS series POV in 2020. Alyssa produced and edited Steve James' short documentary film, The Ride of Their Lives, for Amazon's documentary series. The New Yorker presents. It premiered at Sundance and screened at IDFA. Alyssa's work has appeared on National Geographic Channel, PBS, HBO, and ARTE. Alyssa has an MA in visual anthropology from the University of Manchester. Her background in ethnographic filmmaking gives her a unique skill set to connect with subjects and build cross-cultural understanding on her films. Zachary Fink is an Emmy Award-winning documentary film director and cinematographer. He shot and co-directed The Rescue List, which won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Social Issue Documentary in October of 2021. The Rescue List broadcast on PBS series POV in the US, BBC in the UK, ARTE in France and Germany, NHK in Japan, and CCTV in China. Zachary recently spent a month in Antarctica where he field directed and lensed a series for PBS's Nova called Polar Extremes about life and science at McMurdo Station. Prior to that, he shot State of Pride, a 2019 YouTube original documentary in which activist Raymond Braun, along with Academy Award-winning directors Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman, explore the LGBT rights movement 50 years after Stonewall. During his tenure as the director of video for the George Lucas Educational Foundation, he cinematically rebranded the short documentary films at the center of the foundation's website, edutopia.org. Early in his career, he collaborated with Robert Gardner at the Harvard Film Studies Center to produce the 40th anniversary box set of Gardner's 1964 film, Dead Birds. Zachary received his MA in cultural anthropology from the University of Colorado, Boulder. With a focus in ethnographic filmmaking, he also holds an MFA in film production from California Institute of Arts. Moderating today's discussion is Dr. Robert Chang. Robert is currently the coordinating producer of America ReFramed and is part of the programming and production team at American Documentary. American Documentary curates 3 independent documentary series broadcast nationally on public television: POV, POV Shorts, and America ReFramed. Robert is a member of the Producers Guild of America and has served as a juror, screener, programmer, panelist, and reviewer for a range of film festivals, art funders, and foundations. He is also judged for the IDA Awards, the Tellys, RTDNA, Mural Awards, and the News and Documentary Emmys. As an independent filmmaker, Robert's work has screened worldwide at festivals and is distributed by Documentary Educational Resources. Dr. Chang received his PhD in cultural anthropology at NYU. His doctoral research centered on media in order to highlight how cosmopolitan, immigrant, and religious identities are crafted in secular multicultural societies. Most broadly, his research bridged frameworks of media, production, and embodied sensory practices, transnational formations of religious identity, religiosity, and its mediations of social life. And with this, I pass it on to Robert, who will lead us in our discussion today on the rescue list. Thank you.
Hi, this is Robert. Thank you, Caitlin, for the introduction to me and to Alyssa and Zachary. So I'm Robert Chang. I am an Asian male with hair tied back, wearing a dark gray sweater in front of a blurred backdrop. I use he, him pronouns, and I am zooming in on the unceded land of the Lenape. I think, would you like to give visual descriptions for yourself, Alyssa and Zachary?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. My name is Alyssa Fedele. I'm co-director of The Rescue List. I'm a white woman with shoulder-length dark brown hair, wearing glasses and a V-neck black sweater, sitting next to my co-director, Zachary Fink, in our office with office paraphernalia in the background.
And I'm Zachary Fink. I am a white male in my mid-40s. I use he, him pronouns. I have short cropped, very dark brown hair and also a dark brown beard, and I'm wearing glasses and a dark gray button-down shirt. And we're honored to be here with you all today.
Definitely, and looking very much forward to the conversation. And before we get there, I'd like to just, can we cue the trailer and for the audience.
Within the Adam, mini baby me free. And the papa me deserve, and the papa be a band me mammy the bag to a be, and the many when or their mammy to mend the papa nature. Yet you quit it tinting. And upon the papa name Minister Vinel, you have football to confuse me. And soon, my dear, you and Kessel, you. Everything that's Papa, we are being Miss Slave Master.
Daddy, Nidia. But their mommy, who friend it? It is a one. So my friends are popping for my friends and Miss Munko. You cook for one go ahead. I'm a family and Mumbra.
Person me use for the table. Ah, show the way, bra. The champion is a Akolano Abba. First, I'm listening. And then about 5 more. I feel like there's one particular child somewhere that I need to rescue. Until that child is rescued, I'll continue doing this work. I know I am calling you when I am not. Fente.
Such a powerful trailer every time that I watch it, and you know, I'm inspired to ask and to think about the way that you open the film, because the way that you open the trailer is very similar, you know, in terms of the shooting is how you open the film. And I was wondering if you can talk about sort of the decision that went into opening the film, centering the voice of, I believe it was
Edom.
Edom, yes.
Yeah.
Centering the voice of Edom in your film.
Yeah, absolutely. This is Alyssa speaking. So we wanted, because the world of modern slavery and trafficking is not super familiar to all audiences, we felt that we needed to lay out the story simply and clearly at the beginning of the film so that we could then proceed into our observational storytelling. But the film does not open observationally. And the way that we got to that storytelling device is that through our observational process, we were filming with the children and the social workers as they participated in a therapy process called narrative exposure therapy. And so the conversations that you see later on in the film between the social workers and Edom and Peter were part of this narrative exposure therapy. And in each session, they would guide the children through their lifeline, their timeline. And the idea is to use the flowers and the stones to represent positive and negative experiences in their experiences. And the idea of the therapy is to give the children ownership and power over telling their story so that they can reclaim it and it doesn't re-traumatize them. And at the end of those therapy sessions, the children are able to tell their story powerfully and strongly.
Like a testimonial, essentially, is what they called it.
And so we filmed that testimonial with Adam once he had completed those therapy sessions. And that is what opens the film. And it's, you know, distinct footage because it doesn't look like observational footage. It's not observational footage. But we felt that you could feel his power in his story and his ownership over his story. And that it was a really clear way to set up the story and to communicate the power of these survivors. And so that's why we elected to open the film that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's the most important part of that for us really is that that's, you know, his owning of that testimonial, right? Like it's not something that came from an interview where we were asking him questions. We got to sit down with him and he essentially shared his story with us. And that's the document that came out of it. And we chose to film it in a very intense way because we just felt like his story was intense. And so it's tightly framed and we just let him kind of speak his history. It just felt like the right place to begin the film. And
it's distinct from our, you know, other approach in the film. We didn't sit down and interview the children because of its potential to re-traumatize them. But we noticed at the shelter that the social workers were essentially helping them tell their story through these therapy sessions. And we felt that that was a much safer way to convey their backstories rather than us interviewing them directly.
That's fascinating. I'm gonna circle back to that a little bit later about the narrative exposure therapy. But before I get there, I was wondering if you might share with us a little bit about sort of your respective backgrounds in anthropology and ethnographic filmmaking and how that informed your approach, both stylistically, but also how you stylistically and how you undertook the filming of the rescue list.
Yeah, definitely affected our kind of methodological approach in the field as well. Shall I start?
Sure.
So this is Zachary. I've always been kind of, I was like an AV kind of a nerd in middle school. I just loved audio visual stuff and, you know, VHS camcorders back in the day, and kind of always thought that maybe I was gonna get involved in film in some sort of way. But in college, I took an anthropology class and I just had my mind blown basically up these new kind of tools to see the world. And I quickly decided to focus my major on anthropology. And I had a wonderful professor at the University of Colorado where I did my undergraduate work who used ethnographic films in a lot of his courses. His name was Paul Shankman. And just a really wonderful teacher, and I struck up a friendship with him. He was mentoring me in a lot of ways, and he really was the one that introduced me to the idea that I could combine my love of film and video with anthropology in this way. And I ended up making a short film while I was a student of his, and deciding that I really wanted to pursue that in a graduate school. And I ended up studying with Lucien Taylor and Elisa Barbash, who came to the University of Colorado and created a certificate program in ethnographic filmmaking. So I got a master's in cultural anthropology with a focus on ethnographic film there, and have been using the tools and methodologies of anthropology in my filmmaking kind of ever since. I went on to get an MFA in film production and have been blending that. I'll let Alyssa talk a little bit about her background, and then we can talk about like how specifically we use those methods in the field on this film and all of our work.
This is Alyssa. So I went into college with cultural anthropology as my declared major. I had the good fortune of taking an anthropology class as a high school student, and I was just fascinated by the lens of anthropology to view the world and understand cultures. And so I went into CU Boulder as an undergraduate in cultural anthropology, but about halfway through, I started thinking, okay, well, what am I going to do with my degree in anthropology? I wasn't sure that I wanted to continue in academia per se. And right at that time is when Lisa Barbesh and Lucian Taylor came to CU Boulder and started an ethnographic filmmaking certificate program, which was mainly for master's students, but they opened it up to undergrads. And so through that program, I learned about the history of ethnographic film and the theory, as well as practical filmmaking. We had the opportunity to make films. And I thought, okay, here it is. This is my opportunity to take this lens of anthropology and work in the world in a different way. And so I ended up going to the Granada Center for Visual Anthropology at the University of Manchester, where I earned my MA in visual anthropology. And so we can move into the approach. Anthropology really, it really undergirds everything we do in filmmaking, so much so that it is sometimes almost invisible to us, and we have to think deeply about where does this come from and remind ourselves of our roots. But it definitely shows up in our methodology. We practice participant observation in the field. So we spend extended periods of time in the field, much longer than typical documentary film crews, building relationships and gaining knowledge and participating as much as we can. We always have the camera with us, even when we're not filming, and we're always hanging out and waiting for those moments when we can film observationally. We also believe really strongly in cultural relativism. So when we're making a film, we're seeking to understand the lives of our participants from a culturally relative perspective, and then to represent that viewpoint in the films that we make through observational filmmaking.
Yeah, we feel it's really important for us to understand the world in which our protagonists are living through their eyes, but we also want to feature that perspective through their lived experiences on camera, so that our audience can kind of have that experience as well. And we, instead of doing that through interviews and narration, or even excessive title cards or archival footage, we try to tell the stories as observationally as possible. And in this way, we're really trying to create films that, build cross-cultural understanding between our audience and our subjects.
Yeah, the sort of not only, so are my mic levels better? Please let me know if they're still a little low. But yeah, in terms of, this is Robert, and in terms of thinking through sort of one's own stance and approach methodologically, it's always useful to do that in dialogue. And I'm actually very curious that you're a filmmaking team. And I was just wondering, in terms of the dialogue that you have with each other, where do you challenge each other the most to take an ethnographic or an anthropological cross-cultural approach? Or are you sort of vibing on the same wavelength at most of the time?
That's a really good question. We have this conversation a lot because, we're partners. We're also kind of partners in life, right? We're a married couple, and we've been together for a long time. We've been working together for a long time. And I think that one of the reasons that we're able to make our creative partnership work so well is because we both come at our work from this background, this anthropological viewpoint, this ethnography, this visual ethnography perspective and methodology. And I think that we do tend to kind of vibe at the same level, and we think about things in a lot of the same ways. So,
and we've worked together for basically our whole careers. I mean, my first job out of grad school, we worked together on a National Geographic Channel show. So we not only did we meet in school and we have similar educational backgrounds and approaches to our filmmaking, but we've also kind of built our careers together, working together. And I think we both believe in the power of small moments to carry deep meaning in our films. And so we're always looking for that. We're always trying to slow down and embed and find those really small moments. Like in The Rescue List, one of the very first scenes that we filmed was the kids doing laundry at the shelter.
It's actually in the trailer.
Yeah, it's in the trailer. And it was actually, I think, the very first scene that we shot, that once we got a translation after we filmed it and realized what had transpired, we said, oh, we filmed our first scene. That was a scene. And we're committed to filming small moments, kids doing laundry. You wouldn't think much could necessarily come out of that. But in that moment, one of the major themes of the film revealed itself, which was the friendship that Peter had with his friend Tay, who was still enslaved on the lake. And he reveals in that scene that he wants the rescuers to go back and rescue his best friend. We had no idea at that moment about these strong friendships that the children built on the lake and the way that the friendships enabled them to endure what they go through. And that really set it off. And so I think our commitment to filming those small, seemingly insignificant moments is really at the heart of what we do, and the power of observational cinema, of ethnographic cinema, and its ability to bridge across cultures, because anyone can understand what it means to care about your best friend.
I think also, this isn't directly related to the question, but it might be a good jumping off moment to mention the fact that there are 7 languages that are spoken in this film. One of them is English briefly by the social work team when they have a meeting, but the other 6 languages are Ghanaian languages that nobody in the film speaks all 6 of those languages. So there was no one person that could do a translation of all the dialogue that was spoken in the film. But it also meant that, we don't speak any of those languages apart from English. And it meant that we were really following our intuition and the energy of the moment when we were filming, kind of filming these small moments, dedicated to showing up, dedicated to observing, dedicated to being there, and just kind of filming and seeing what would arise later. And so oftentimes even the translator and our collaborator in the field that we were working with, we'd ask him, what are they talking about? What's going on? And he would have to lean over and say, I don't know. I don't speak the language that they're speaking. We'll have to mediate that in a common language when they're done talking, and I'll kind of get the gist of it. So it added a lot of complexity to the filmmaking process, but it really forced us to lean into our observational methodologies, in the field, to really just kind of be there and film what was happening and kind of see what revealed itself in the edit once we could get our raw footage subtitled and translated and subtitled.
This is Alyssa. Just to add on to that, I think when we started making this film, we didn't necessarily intend to make an almost entirely observational film. We thought that we would need interviews to contextualize the story, maybe speak with experts, that type of thing. But because of what Zach just talked about, the languages, also the sensitivity of the space that we were working in, and our desire to be as respectful and sensitive to the children and their recovery process as possible, we leaned into those observational roots and really tried to just be there, be present, and film moments as much as we could, and see what we had later when we were able to have it translated and transcribed.
So I really love the way, this is Robert, I really love the way that you formulated sort of your observational approach in terms of filming the small moments that that convey so much meaning. And on that note, I'd like to sort of dive into a scene with you. And I was wondering if you might be willing to join me and just describe for the audience the scene in which it's during a rescue, and the camera enters a village, and there's a conversation that unfolds on screen before we even see the child who is Teye, who is there, right? So I was wondering if you can describe the scene and just sort of for the audience, sort of talk through sort of what you observed while you were filming the scene and what you realized, and perhaps even sort of speak through the questions of informed consent and the ethics of filmmaking in such a complex moment.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Should I take kind of the description and let you dive in? So in this scene, the rescue team is on a rescue mission. They're looking for Peter's friend Tay. Peter's already asked the team, to find him. They were enslaved to the same person on Lake Volta. Ruben Papa is that person. Kwame, the lead rescuer, asks the chief of the village, asks for the chief of the village, excuse me, to come and so that he can speak with him. And the community gathers under this kind of thatched roof structure, so that it's not just the chief, it's the elders, and it's everybody, of importance in the community. It's then that he shares that he's looking for a boy named Tay, and that he believes that a man in the village named Ruben Papa has him. Kwame also explains to everybody who's gathered that when he was a child, he was sent by his father to the lake for work so that his sisters could go to school. But he was rescued and he received an education. And because of that, he has so much more opportunity in his life. And he implores the village to send Tay back with Kwame and the rescue team so they can take him back to his family so that he can also get an education. I think he says in the film, so that his God-given abilities, can be available to him. The gathered group debates about the merits and argues about releasing Tay, and ultimately decide that they're going to send Tay back with the rescue team. And the scene kind of ends with, the rescue team walking Tay out to the rescue boat and motoring across the lake.
Yeah, so I think the first most notable thing to say about this scene is that it's a 4-minute scene, and it was a 4-hour-long conversation. So this did not happen as quickly as it does in the film, but it was a protracted negotiation. And the other thing that is interesting about this scene is the rescue style. So the rescue organization Challenging Heights, they're not the only people doing this rescue work, but they are a grassroots organization that was founded by a Ghanaian man who survived trafficking himself. And the organization is staffed entirely by Ghanaians from the local communities that are targeted by traffickers. And some of them, like Kwame, are survivors of trafficking as well. What that means is that they understand the cultural norms of these villages, and they understand how to operate in a culturally relative way. So to paint the opposite picture, some other organizations that work in the area forcibly remove children. They come in with the police with armed guards and they take children away. Other organizations sometimes pay the fishermen for the children because the fishermen have paid for them. So they pay them to get them back. And
which can create, like an additional trafficking economy, right? Like, oh, I can sell these kids back to the rescue teams that want them.
So that's not the way that Challenging Heights works at all. They are attempting to also educate the community because this type of trafficking and forced labor is normalized in these communities. This is something that happens frequently, and oftentimes the villagers and the fishermen don't completely understand why they may need to give the child back to their family. So Kwame is really trying to reason with them and negotiate. He wants to respect them And he wants to be able to return to that community and have it be safe for his rescue team. If he acts callously, then it could be dangerous for them to return. And he knows that he most likely will have to return to this area to rescue children in the future. So I think that that's all really notable, and you can kind of sense that as you watch the scene. Do you want to talk a little bit about consent and how we navigated that?
Yeah, I would say that in terms of consent, this is one of the more tricky areas, because while we were on the rescue, obviously we'd already built relationships and rapport with the rescue team, but we were moving into villages where we were just kind of showing up with a camera, where we didn't know anybody. We never entered a village with the rescue team. We always stayed on the periphery of every village that we walked to with the rescue team, allowing Kwame and the team to go in first. Kwame and the team would often have conversations that would last from 15 minutes to an hour before we were invited in, either with or without our cameras, where he was gathering the elders, looking for the chief, sitting everybody down, and finally, kind of like revealing who he was, why he was there, and the fact that he was working with this team of two people that were foreigners that had a camera that were documenting his work and asking for permission and explaining, why we were there and the importance of it. I think in about 90% of the cases, I think there were maybe just one or two villages that we went to where they refused entry to us, or they asked us not to film, which of course we respected and honored. But the main thing was that, it was essentially Kwame sitting down with the chief and the elders, kind of explaining things ahead of time and asking for permission before kind of summoning us into the community. You can see even in the trailer, there's one shot where there's no faces revealed. It's on a very long lens. You see the kind of the thatched roof structure and backs of people sitting there that I filmed, when we were sitting around waiting for about 45 minutes to go into the village where Tay was being held, just to have some kind of an establishing shot. And also because we waited out there for quite a while, we thought this may be the only shot we get of this entire scene, which we thought at the time, if this was indeed the village where Tay was being held, it could be, what we would imagine to be one of the main climaxes of the film, right? And we might not be able to film in there at all. And so, I kind of have this one shot that we ended up using as an establisher before we were brought in finally, and thankfully, but that we were kind of banking on, maybe this is all we're going to get, and we're going to have to build this out in a completely different way. So, it was very important for us to kind of be following the protocols that Kwame and the rescue team set forth when we were moving through these worlds. I think Robert may have frozen. Robert, are you still with us? Anybody from the AAAs on there?
He's coming back. This is Jeff Martin. Can I a quick question? Any follow-up from after your filming, post-filming with Kwame or Peter or any of the characters? Do you keep in touch?
Oh yes, yeah. We do, and we can dig into it now, especially if Robert's not coming. But
yeah, I mean making this film has profoundly changed our lives, and we have relationships with the children to this day, and with everyone at Challenging Heights. Thankfully, Peter has actually learned English from an apprenticeship that he's taking, or that he was taking, to learn to be a welder. And so we now communicate with him almost daily through WhatsApp. He sends us messages to check in on us, and we check in on him. All three of the children are now working with an aftercare organization that's local to their communities, that is providing apprenticeship training and daily living expenses. And we're working with that organization to help support the three young men in learning to become independent, which is the goal of that organization. And they're all doing very well. We visited in June of this year, and
2021. We made a trip back, having not seen them for about 4 years.
And Adam, who used to be like at my shoulder height, has shot up to about 6'5", so he's grown up, and they're all doing very well.
Yeah,
they've seen the film, they have copies of the film, they feel very proud to have been in the film, and to know that it is actually the rescue organization is using a dubbed version of the film, dubbed into Twi, which is the main language that most people speak and understand in Ghana. And they're using it in communities. They're screening the film to educate local people about what happens to children who go to the lake. And after almost every screening, people usually come up and add names to their rescue list. So the children are very proud to be a part of that, and to know that they're helping to solve this issue.
This is Robert. I'm back, and I gather there was a follow-up question about Idemte and Peter. And I was eager to hear about that as well. So thank you for asking, whoever asked that. And I did actually make it through. My connection held until the end of your answer, Zachary, around that scene. And one of the other scenes that I really wanted to hear you speak about more, because it's another scene where you're getting, the audience is being brought very close to one of the characters, where Edom goes and prays by the water. And I was wondering if you can talk, because you mentioned it earlier in terms of the narrative exposure therapy, and I was just wondering, this process of narrative exposure and also the narrative of the documentary that you're crafting and that you're sharing with the viewers, like how those aligned and in that particular scene.
Yeah. Well, do you want to?
I can give you
Describe the scene. Sure. Yeah.
This is Alyssa. So in this scene, Adam and the social workers are traveling to the beach for Adam to say a prayer. And this is part, as you said, Robert, this is part of the narrative exposure therapy. They've noticed through the therapy sessions that Adam is experiencing a deep level of grief over the loss of his friend Stephen, who died on the lake, who drowned while he was attempting to free some nets from underwater. And the grief has caused Adam to really retreat, and he's very shy and withdrawn. And so they've determined, with his input, to do a therapeutic intervention, which is a prayer at the beach. They're actually, where the rescue center is located, is closer to the ocean than the lake. So they go to the seaside for Adam to say this prayer. And the hope is that, because of the importance of funerary rites and rituals in Ghana, that saying this prayer will help Adam to release some of the grief that he's holding over Stephen. And so we were checking in with the social workers when we arrived to film, and they told us about this intervention. And of course, we were interested to film it, but as was the case throughout making this film, the children's recoveries were primary. And that was the mindset that we approached everything that we did. And so we talked with them and with Adam about, how could we film this without interrupting or preventing him from having this cathartic experience. And so do you want to talk a little bit about how we decided to shoot it?
Yeah. So the main choice that we made was to shoot it on a long lens. I was using a 70 to 200 millimeter zoom on the camera. And so we started about maybe 50 or 70 feet away from Adam. It's also really important to understand that we've been working with Adam for quite some time. And, part of our filmmaking process with all of the children that we were working with at the shelter was to get them behind the camera at certain times as well, so that they could look through the viewfinder, look at the monitor, put the headphones on, and understand that the little, microphone transmitter pack that we were, testing out with them, I could put it on my body and I could walk across the interior courtyard of the rehabilitation center, the shelter, and he could have his headphones on at the camera and I could speak to him and he could hear me. And so he making sure that they understood what this technology was doing. So by the time we were going to the seashore with Adam, he had been wearing a microphone regularly. And as was our practice in the field, anytime we pulled the camera out or put a microphone on one of the children, we asked for their permission in that moment. And they knew that they had the right to say no. And sometimes they did when they weren't feeling up for it. And so anyway, in this moment, we had explained to Adam that we were going to stay back, but we would like to be able to record his prayer if he was okay with that. And our expectation around that was that he might pray for a couple of minutes, and say his offering, and we would be going again. And so we set up directly behind him so that we weren't in his field of view. He knew that we were going to be there. And Adam just started praying and praying and praying. And this 4-minute, what we thought was going to be a 4-minute prayer, and I think it ended up being maybe 2 minutes in the final cut of the film, was actually 45 minutes of nonstop praying that Adam undertook on that beach. And it was just this catharsis outpouring of love and friendship for his missing friend Stephen, and a fair amount of guilt coming out as well. So we really saw a strong link between the friendship that Adam had with Stephen, who drowned right in front of him on the boat while they were fishing, and the friendship that Peter had with Tay. And so we tried to kind of build that link out throughout the narrative structure of the film, because one of the themes that surfaced very early on for us was this feeling, this friendship, this theme of friendship and brotherhood kind of replacing the family ties on the lake. And I think the scene that we're talking about exemplifies that perhaps better than any other.
I was just thinking through about sort of the ongoing navigation of consent. It's not one and done, but an ongoing conversation and agreement as and a practice of that, both in terms of the style of shooting and the approach that you took with these two key scenes that are sort of this tremendous sort of cinematic condensation of experience, right? 4 hours into that scene and like 45 minutes into those 2 minutes, and conveying in those two scenes, being observational, but also with in a very distinctive style. That's fascinating. And quite striking to hear you talk about that, because I'm thinking about, for those anthropologists who might want to bring this film into the classroom, right? Like what, I'm wondering, right? Like how do I phrase this question? Right. So for people who may want to use this film in the classroom, like what would you say is important as a setup and context that might not be provided solely within the film, or sort of highlighting aspects of the film that should be featured as sort of cued in, like pay attention to this moment, right? Margaret Mead's like, pay very close attention or you will miss it completely. It's a line that she says in her childhood films. So I was just wondering if you can speak to a little bit about that. Let me restate to simplify it. What would you say to people who are interested in bringing this film to the classroom?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we have lots of thoughts about it. I think one of the things that we were taught when we were students, that I think remains really true for us and shapes the way that we make films and that we view films as well, is that we believe it's not necessarily the job of a film to answer questions, but rather to raise them. And we hope that when people watch this film, for example, that they leave having many more questions than they started with. And so I think, you know, it's always really interesting to see, well, what questions do people have? I mean, when we screen this film, we love doing Q&As because it's always so interesting to dive into these conversations of what does this bring up for you? You know, the issues in the film and the themes in the film are ripe for discussion. Trafficking and modern slavery is not often well understood, nor are the personal experiences often shared in film. What we found when we undertook this project to start, is that many films were interview-based or expert-based or statistics-based, and that they didn't necessarily draw us into the lives of survivors in recovery and in power. And we really, in making this film, we wanted to validate and empower the survivors in our film by prioritizing their experience in recovery and not focusing on their victimization. So that was something that was extremely important to us to focus on and to lift up when making this film. I also think that in terms of the subject matter, you know, facts and figures and statistics are really readily available online, but less so are the relationships between survivors. And that's why the theme of friendship is woven throughout the film. It's not the headline story that you hear about when you hear about, you know, trafficking and modern slavery, right? But this is what we found. And this is what we found so powerful and so human and so connecting when we were telling this story, so uplifting as well. Many times we would tell people about the film project we were working on, and they would just say, like, I honestly don't want to hear about that. It sounds terrible. And we would say, well, that's not what we're finding in the field. We're finding these incredibly inspiring, strong survivors who have created friendships in the place of family. So I think that was really interesting to us as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Alyssa said, the questions that come out of a close viewing of this film are fantastic springboards for further research in a classroom, and great opportunities for professors and teachers to use the film as a way to dig into other research topics. We, just as a side note, we were really surprised. We expected that, you know, the film would resonate with high school students and college students, but we've been really surprised to find that middle school students are deeply engaged in this film when they view it. I would say, if, you know, kids are old enough to follow along with subtitles, they really see themselves kind of represented on screen. They can identify with the protagonists in our story. And we've found a lot of engagement with middle schoolers as well, which has been a really kind of rewarding process to see kids who are the same age as the protagonists in the story just being really connected and having a lot of questions and thoughtful, you know, responses to the film. It's been really nice.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm very curious about some of the questions that they asked the middle schoolers when they see this film, you know, because it's one of the questions that this film raised for me when I watched it was sort of, what are the notions of childhood that are at play in this region, right? You spoke earlier about the normalization of a certain set of economic and labor configurations, right, that normalized this form of slavery. But you know, questions of labor and childhood, I was wondering if you can speak to that, and is that something that middle schoolers, when they see this film, reflect on at all, or are they reflecting on other themes like friendship?
Yeah, I mean, the question that comes to mind that middle schoolers often ask is, why do the children go home to their families, and why do they want to go home to their families? Which also, you know, opens the door into a conversation about the way that Challenging Heights works. You know, they believe that children belong with their families, and they're attempting to reunite these families and heal these communities, so that the children, when they go back, can actually be abolitionists in the sense that they will fight for their own rights and the rights of other children, not to have to stay out of school and work, but rather go to school and have better opportunities. And so that's always an interesting conversation to have with children when they see the film. I think also, contextualizing it for children in the sense that American childhoods are quite different from the childhoods that people have around the world, particularly in subsistence economies where children are expected to work. And particularly in families that are struggling to put food on the table, those children may be sent to work to provide for the family. And of course, in our film, there's this extended trafficking network that separates children from their family, which is when you get into situations of forced labor and modern slavery. And so having that discussion about how do social norms evolve into trafficking or modern slavery is something that I think is quite helpful also to put a perspective on our own social norms and our own privileges in America.
Well, I wanted to thank you very much for this time and sharing with us your thoughts about both the film and its context and its making. It's really eye-opening and very striking. Like, I think this film accomplishes so much, and if I had more time, I would want to ask more about the dubbed version, which is I'm quite excited to hear about, because I think it's engaging impact in ways that are beyond how impact is usually conceived of.
Thank you.
Do we have time for that? Sorry, just asking.
This is Caitlin. We are close on time, and I want to be respectful of all of our audience's time or participants' time today. But yeah, I thank everyone for this really meaningful discussion. And I do want to remind everybody that you do still have access to view the film if you haven't had a chance to view it yet. So please take advantage of that opportunity, because it really is a wonderful film, and you'll get to see everything that was discussed today, all of these scenes that we talked about. This is just one of our Anthropology Live events. We do have more in our webinar series, so I'll post a link in the chat to our webinar series for anybody who's interested in attending more of these events. But yeah, thank you, Zach and Alyssa and Robert, for leading this discussion today and for being with us.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Robert, for leading this discussion. It's been really excellent to chat with you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, very much so. And we're honored to be reconnected with our anthropological roots in this way with you all. So thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Take
Appreciate
care.
it.